Okay, let's get started. This is going to be about connecting best practices for teaching linguistically and culturally diverse international students with international student satisfaction and student perceptions of learning. My name is Dr. Clayton Smith. I'm an associate professor in the Faculty of Education at the University of Windsor, and that is in Windsor, Ontario, in Canada. And it's a pleasure to be speaking to the Ireland International Conference on Education on this topic. Our agenda includes these things. We'll talk a little bit about the research team, an introduction, research design, some findings, our conclusions, and what we have in store next. Again, you can see here, I'm from the Faculty of Education, as is Dr. George Joe. Professor Michael Potter, Center for Teaching and Learning. He's our teaching and learning specialist. Ms. Dina Wong, who's our international student advisor, and Ms. Miranda Pecoraro, our outstanding scholar. She's a third-year social work student. Also, all of us here at the University of Windsor. Next, let me give you a bit of an introduction of our project. It's another record year for Canadian international education. As is pointed out here, we have 572,415 international students in Canada. That's up 16% over 2017, in which the numbers grew by 20% in that year as well. So numbers continuing to increase. Canada is being perceived as a very attractive study destination. The president of the Canadian Bureau of International Education, Larissa Bezzo, says, "Our research shows that international students choose Canada because of the quality of the Canadian education system and our reputation as a safe and tolerant country." And that reputation plays out with a 96% of our students saying that they would recommend Canada to their family and friends, which is great. Here's an infographic that really shows you not only the numbers, but also where these students are coming from. And as you can see, China and India are the major originating countries, but there are many others. Campus internationalization generally focuses on external areas: education abroad, student exchange, recruiting international students, international partnerships. But we need to be looking internally as well. Robin Metros Helms, the director of the American Council of Education Center for Internationalization and Global Engagement, says, "We need to make sure that faculty are engaged in and central to internationalization efforts." And that's starting to play out in international and global student learning outcomes being developed on our campuses, more internationally focused general education requirements, and additional foreign language requirements as well. So it's both a challenge and an opportunity. It's a challenge because our faculty in general, me included, did not receive formal training for intercultural learning or inclusive education. But what we know is there is a lot of promising practices that faculty are engaging in which have the potential to make a real difference here. So the promising teaching practices. Well, they fall into, as best I can determine, three areas. One are those things that provide increased contextual information and linguistic support, specific learning and study approaches, and greater opportunities for classroom interaction and participation. Kinsella points those out to us. Gay says that it's about putting culturally responsive teaching into practice in the classroom. And Tomlinson suggests a slice of that by saying that we need to use different instructional approaches that build on student strengths. So here are the ones that we found. We found 107 grouped in these categories, and ranging from academic integrity to visual communications. We also found that international students are largely satisfied with the learning experience in North America, and indeed in the world. You see 89%, or 9 of 10 in Canada and US colleges, and 87% for those that extend beyond that point. But we do know that they break into these kinds of places where there's variance in the data. So we know there's differences in the way students feel about the experience on the basis of their country of origin, their study level, their program, study time, study stage, or their age. Next, let me introduce the research design that we followed. First, the purpose. Our purpose was to explore these promising teaching practices by identifying the practices that have high levels of student satisfaction and high levels of student perception of learning. We're interested in both of those things. And so here it is in a graphical way. So we have the strategies on the left, and on the right you see international student satisfaction, and just below student perceptions of learning. It's that sweet spot in the middle that our study is aimed at. The research questions are two. So what are the promising teaching practices for teaching linguistically and culturally diverse international students that have high international student satisfaction? And what are the promising teaching practices for teaching linguistically and culturally diverse international students that are associated with high international student perception levels of student learning? So we're interested in the things that create student satisfaction and also the teaching practices that correlate with high levels of student perceptions related to student learning. We did a pilot study. There were 10 students. Half were in their first year and spoke a language other than English as their first language. And the remaining students were upper-level undergraduate or graduate students. They reviewed the questions, and then they suggested some modifications, which we subsequently made. The research participants were all of our international students enrolled in the winter 2018 semester. They represented a wide array of areas, countries of origin, study levels, academic programs, study stages, ages, all sorts of things. Incidentally, those are some of the same areas that the International Student Barometer data found variance on. In the data collection, we collected the survey data in February 2018, so all of them were surveyed. We did 5 focus groups after that in March, April, and then 6 individual interviews about the same time for a 32% response rate. In the analysis, well, here we go. This is what we found. The survey data found that 93% said they were satisfied or very satisfied with their learning experience, which is great. We found that teaching practices were satisfied or very satisfied in terms of general satisfaction that was greater than 70% for these kinds of areas. Academic integrity all the way down through to visual communications. So there were some things that they were highly satisfied with. We also found the ones that were high with regard to perception of student learning were slightly different. Some of them were the same, but there were quite a number of these as well. They're not the same. And then what we have is the top 8. They are academic integrity, assessment, assignments, clarifying expectations, communication outside of the classroom, lecture design and delivery, verbal communications, and visual communication. So 8 areas where both came together in that special spot. We found that the relationship between student satisfaction and student perception of learning for each promising teaching practice was in fact positive. All correlations were at the 0.01 level. The most positive correlations, those at 0.7 or higher, were reported for these areas: assessing needs, assignments, clarifying expectations, class preparation, culturally responsive teaching, feedback, and language proficiency. The findings for the focus groups and the interviews was focused a bit differently, more on characteristics. And so we found again the learning experiences were mainly positive, that instructors were a key factor in the student experience, and that some of these characteristics were especially appreciated, and they include humor, valuing diverse cultures, and an encouraging approach. And that students at all stages endorsed a student-centered approach, use of interactive teaching methods, specific and prompt feedback, use of practical experiences, pleasant learning environment, and methods that support the learning of additional language learners. I also found at the study stage slight differences. The students in the ESL program called for strategies that help improve writing, daily homework, and in-advance agendas. Undergraduates we spoke with talked about academic support, updated curricula, and partially filled slides in advance of class. And graduate students spoke of the importance of a free learning environment, multimodality teaching strategies, use of digital and visual materials, and emotional, physical, and non-judgmental support from their supervisor. Now here are some conclusions. First, we identified the teaching practices that had high satisfaction, high student perceptions of learning, both high student satisfaction and high student perceptions of learning. And we identified some teacher characteristics that international students prefer. But we also have some limitations we need to report. The responses on the survey were approximately 2/3 graduate students, which limits what we can say about the undergraduate student experience, except in some overall ways. The perceptions of student learning data is self-reported, which makes it hard to discern how much student learning can be accurately associated with each teaching practice. And the study was completed in the winter semester and is based on one semester of data alone. Research conducted for the full academic year may have created more response diversity. For further research, we think we need to better understand how the identified teaching practices that produce high levels of student satisfaction and student perceptions of learning are impacted by individual student characteristics such as study location, program stage, length of time studying outside of the country of origin, study level, country of origin, age, gender, parents, educational level. Which students' practices predict high levels of student satisfaction? So the prediction part. And how student satisfaction and student perception of learning related to teaching practices change over time. And there's a link in here where you can go for more information. We're continuing to add to what we know, and all of that information is available to the public. And now I'll stop here for questions and comments. Thank you very much.